Hey guys, how's it going? Robert Warshak here, and as we know at the beginning of each expansion, the most popular questions are what are the best decks and what are the best budget decks I can build with the new cards and the amount of dust I have. So basically I put together what I think are the top 5 best budget decks you could possibly build under 2,500 dust. That is honestly not a lot of dust for the power level of the decks that we're going to cover. All of these, some of them maybe you haven't seen before, but some of them definitely you've seen on Laddered, but obviously we've scaled back on some of the legendaries, but we've replaced them with other cards that either have the same effect or a similar effect that gets the job done. So with that, let's head into our first deck that we're going to talk about. And that's going to be the Silence Priest. So this deck, actually, a lot of people have been playing a lot of different renditions. This seems to be the most popular list in regards to the Silence Priest, and I would have to agree with it. I played multiple games with it. The deck functions very, very well. It's very, very cheap. 1,400 dust for this deck, and we climbed quite a few ranks with it. I watched a couple other streamers play a couple variants very similar to the list, and it also climbed quite a few ranks with it. So with that, what does the deck do? You look at it and you're like, well, I really don't see how we win. I just see some mediocre minions, and yeah, that's about it. So basically what Silent Priest is trying to accomplish is it plays stuff like Ancient Watcher, it plays stuff like the Arcane Watcher, and it basically silences them through cards like, of course, Silence, and the new card Dalaran Librarian. When you silence these minions, they're very cheap to play, and their stats are very high. So through silencing, you basically get a 2-mana 4/5 that can start attacking and stuff. So normally the card is very bad, but because we silenced it, the card is now very good. So between being able to win through very low cost, high statted minions due to silence, we also have, of course, the Divine Spirit Inner Fire combo that we can use on cards like the Witchwood Grizzly, the Faceless Rager, and the Shade Quill. Does very well against aggressive style decks, and it also does really well against control style decks, just because the combo in the deck, you could easily do over 30 damage when you do the Inner Fire combo. On top of that, extremely cheap, a little harder to play, to be honest. This isn't one of those decks where you can just throw up on the board and not really care what you're playing. Definitely a more high thinking intensive deck in comparison to some of the others that we're going to cover. So heading on over to the Zoo Warlock, this has been a deck that's been, you know, a really solid deck for a long time now. It gets cards, it loses cards, but Zoo Warlock seems to be a deck that just lives on through expansion, through expansion, through expansion. Whether or not it's the most popular deck or not, or the most powerful out of the expansion, it always is a deck that just does well. It's always relatively cheap, you know, 2,100 dust. And it gets the job done great. This is a great deck for beginning players to kind of learn the game, to understand, you know, when should I tap for life, you know, to draw cards? When should I play minions? When should I buff those minions? When should I trade? When do I go face? This is one of those decks that just has all of the components of how to play Hearthstone in it. And the games go relatively quickly. So as we know, a Zoo deck has always been a deck that just plays cheap, resilient minions. And, you know, it just floods the board. And it can do this because it has the Warlock Hero Power Life Tap, which allows you to sacrifice your health for drawing more cards. Most of the time, your opponent's spending most of their resources killing your minions, not killing, you know, your health pool. So you have the ability to just keep using your health as a resource to draw more cards, to play more minions. If your opponent finally can't deal with, you know, your minions on the board, you'll just keep hitting them in the face and you'll win. This is more of a demon build. It has the Rafam's scheme. It's got the Fiendish Circle, of course, because of all the demons, we're running Demon Fire. Again, you know, a lot of people maybe run Leroy, a lot of people run, you know, different variants of this. Again, keep in mind, guys, when you're like, Rob, why don't you play Leroy? These are all budget decks. None of these decks that we're going to be covering have any legendaries in them at all. And so with that, we're going to take a look at the next deck, and that's going to be the Token Druid. So looking at this list, you're like, Rob, you promised me no legendaries. Look at that card, 4-mana Archmage Vargoth. That's a legendary. I can't afford it. This deck's 4,100 dust. No, it is not. Archmage Vargoth is free as long as you log into Hearthstone. It's a free card they just give you. So minus the 1,600 dust, and we have 2,500 dust, which is the most expensive deck we're going to go over. All the decks, again, we're going to cover 4,500 or 2,500 dust or less. So this 4,100 doesn't really count because it's counting Archmage, and Archmage is free. So my point. With that, Token Druid. What does this deck do? Whispering Woods, Soul of the Forest, the Forest Aid, you know, it's just Savage Roar. All of these cards are so powerful. We've even included, because we budgeted, Knife Juggler. A lot of people don't expect the Knife Juggler. So Knife Juggler, Whispering Woods, ping for 6. You know, Knife Juggler, Soul of the Forest. You start trading off your minions, make more minions. Knife Juggler pings for more damage. So Knife Juggler, not really a card people think about when they go against a token player. But let me tell you, it's a great budget card, fits into your zoo deck, fits into your token druid deck. Again, when I'm building these deck guides, I'm thinking about cards that you can use in other classes that are good. It's not just good in one class, one specific deck. When I'm taking into account some of these cards and decks, I try to pick cards that are going to last your collection past just this one budget build. So I do keep this in mind when building these decks for you guys. So very, very powerful deck. Highly recommend the token druid. I mean, all of these decks that we're covering, guys, are really surprisingly really good for being budget. So when you're gonna, I know there's gonna be the comment of, hey Rob, you know, which one of these budget decks is the best? Honestly, whatever class that you like best, whatever you think you're gonna like most, all of these decks are going to do very, very well if played correctly and you kind of know what you're doing. Next class and deck we're going to cover is going to be, oh, I love this wallpaper, the Murloc Shaman. So this deck is very hyper aggressive. We're not like this deck, unlike the token deck and the zoo deck, which have basically the ability to rebuild the board with minions because you have so much gas and so much value. This is a deck that's just fully fledged, in your face, every turn, maximum potential, maximum effort, maximum damage. And normally, if your opponent does end up clearing the board, this deck does have a hard time to reload and kind of rebuild what was lost. That's why we run cards like Murloc War Leader, Underbelly Angler, Cold Light Seer. These try to mitigate the damages done by your opponent while increasing value. Also, we've of course included Soul the Murloc, which is kind of like Soul of the Forest, just not as powerful, but it's still really, really good. And you know, this deck, I've seen this deck kill people by turn 4 pretty consistently a lot of the time. The only card that I'm just like on edge with is the Murloc Tasty Fin. This is a card that you guys, if you don't like it, you can of course replace it with something else, but basically all the other cards in the deck are there for a reason and very, very good. So, you know, Murloc Tasty Fin, you don't like it, you want to throw in another Murloc, you want to throw in other draw, you want to throw in like a Rain of Toads. It's just, it was a cheap draw mechanic for some sort of rebuild after, you know, a couple Murloc dies that were not only depending on the Underbelly Angler for card generation, but again, super hyper aggressive deck. This will destroy any greedy deck if they don't draw their brawl on turn 5, or just kill them before they have brawl. I mean, this is just super hyper aggressive, you know, bing bang swishers, you know, get it done, get it right, get it tight. Your opponent has no room at all. So with that, the last deck that we're going to cover, I believe, is going to be the Tempo Rogue. This is a rogue just like the Druid and the Warrior, one of the most popular decks on ladder. Again, we've toned around a couple cards. It doesn't run, you know, Myra's Unstable Element. It doesn't run the new Togwaggle card. Again, budget. But nonetheless, the deck still functions very, very well. The Crazed Chemist, I know it's a card you guys probably have never seen, but it's a card that basically has Cold Blood built into the card, which is quite exciting because we know Cold Blood is a really good card. It also has a huge tempo swing on turn 3 or 4, depending on when you can get your card from another class, whether you get it from the Hench Clan Burglar or the Blink Fox, you know, the Underbelly Fence, and also the Vendetta are crazy tempo swings. Granted, we don't run the 1 mana card that steals a card from your opponent's class, as I couldn't find room to fit it in here, but other card draw mechanics are an option. Also, I know Prep is kind of expensive because it is an epic. This deck is still less than 2,000 dust, but Prep is a rogue card that will last you through the ages. It's been a card from the classic set. Almost every rogue deck plays this card. It's just too good. So when you craft a card like Prep, don't think that you're you know, wasting dust. This is a card that's found in a variety of other rogue decks across the metas since the game's been out, so don't feel bad about that. And that's all of our budget decks. All of the codes should be in this description for those of you looking at it. And also, if you've used any of this deck, are going to use, and have liked, and these decks give you win, please give you wins. Please throw like a like on the video, or just like a KEKXD. That's good enough for me. Comment in the section below. Seriously, it really helps the video out. It shows me that you like the video and you want more of this kind of stuff. So with that, thank you guys for watching. Go out there, destroy tier 1 and tier 2 decks with your budget decks, because I know you can, because these decks are rock solid. Enjoy your games, and of course, happy whatever the hell day it is. Oh, I fucked that up. I'm Rob, and happy whatever the hell day it is.